At the outstart that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is not a politician.
That's right. That's right.
So I'm not here this afternoon as a Republican, nor as a Democrat. Not as a Mason, nor as an elk.
Well, tell us what you're here for.
Not as a Protestant, nor a Catholic.
That's right.
Not as a Christian, nor a Jew.
All right now.
Not as a Baptist, nor a Methodist.
Yes.
In fact, not even as an American.
Yes, sir. All right.
Because if I was an American, the problem that confronts our people today wouldn't even exist.
That's right.
So now we ain't Americans, huh?
So I have to stand here today as what I was when I was born, a black man. Before there was any such thing as a Republican or a Democrat, we were black. Before there was any such thing as a Mason or an elk, we were black.
That's right.
Before there was any such thing as a Jew or a Christian, we were black people. In fact, before there was any such place as America, we were black.
Right.
And after America has long passed from the scene, there will still be black people. I'm going to tell you like it really is. Every election year, these politicians are sent up here to pacify us. They're sent here and set up here by the white man. This is what they do. They send drugs in Harlem down here to pacify us. They send alcohol down here to pacify us. They send prostitution down here to pacify us. Why, you can't even get drugs in Harlem without the white man's permission. You can't get prostitution in Harlem without the white man's permission. You can't get gambling in Harlem without the white man's permission. Every time you break the seal on that liquor bottle, that's a government seal you're breaking. Oh, I say and I say it again, you've been had. You've been took. You've been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok. This is what he does.
Boston Praise Radio 102.9. That's a clip from the epic movie Malcolm X by Spike Lee, Denzel Washington playing Malcolm X. Interesting clip where Minister Malcolm X talks about drugs and other things that we should consider unhealthy and illegal coming into our community, and whether or not it's conspiratorial. Of course it's conspiratorial. Blacks have been treated in conspiratorial ways since the beginning of this nation. Slavery was a grand conspiracy. We have this morning Minister Randy Muhammad from Muhammad's Mosque, number 11 in Grove Hall. And he's here particularly to talk about the cannabis issue in the city of Boston, particularly in Grove Hall, where his mosque is sited. And they call it cannabis, but a lot of us know it as weed or pot or grass or dope or reefer or ganja or hash or herb, or got all kinds of names, Minister Randy. The clip we just played particularly as it relates to drugs in the black community. We've seen iterations of this in the past. The most recent flare-up was around crack in the early 90s. There is now a cannabis store, or what I would like to call a weed store, in Grove Hall currently. There is a move now, or entrepreneurial interest, to bring a weed warehouse to Grove Hall. You oppose it. Let's start with that question. Why do you oppose it? And then we want to get into some of the issues around the impact, moral and spiritually, things like this might have in the community. Why do you oppose the presence of a warehouse?
Yes,
in
yes.
Grove Hall?
Thank you, Kevin. First of all, thank you for inviting me onto your program. I'm honored to be here, to have the opportunity to speak to you and your audience about this very serious and important issue. And you hit it right on the head. You know, our community has been targeted for years, with drugs, and as part of a conspiracy to mass incarcerate black men, and generally to distract us from those things that we should be about in our community: family, building, doing positive and constructive things. Why do I oppose the cannabis dispensary and the distribution center that is being proposed? There are many reasons why I oppose. First and foremost, I oppose on a moral ground. I know that marijuana is not this benign drug that everyone is trying to make it out to be. I see that marijuana is causing a great harm among our people in our community. Marijuana is nowadays, the THC content is 5 times that what it was just 20 years ago. And that
the
includes
THC content is that which makes you intoxicated or high.
Absolutely. The THC is that part of the cannabis plant that is the part that gets you high, as opposed to when you look at the medicinal marijuana that is dealing with more of the the other element in the THC, in the marijuana, the cannabinoids that are healthy and could be used for medicinal purposes. The THC really has no medicinal purposes at all, and so that's strictly to get high. And,
so what's being proposed? Pardon me. What's being proposed at the Grove Hall site, in terms of this warehouse, is the sale of recreational marijuana, not medicinal as you understand it. And therein lies the problem, because the recreational marijuana has THC levels that are exorbitant, that lead to perhaps addiction. Do you believe marijuana is addictive?
Yeah, I actually do believe it's addictive.
It's medically proven, actually, isn't it?
Absolutely. Well, just look at the use of marijuana nowadays. Even the terminology recreational. You think about recreational, you think about maybe something that like 20, 30 years ago, folks who indulged in the use of marijuana for recreational purposes might have used it, on the weekends, or maybe after work in the evening sometimes. But if we look at the way that marijuana is being consumed today, our people are addicted. They're waking up in the morning and need to get high. They're smoking marijuana first thing in the morning for breakfast. They're having it on their lunch break. They're smoking throughout the day. They're having it at dinner time, and they can't go to bed without smoking the joint. That's not recreational. That's an addiction. And so, yes, our people are becoming addicted and are addicted to marijuana. And many, do not even realize that they're addicted, because, they're doing it so often, and they're under the illusion that it's just recreational and it's a choice. And that's how most addictive drugs, that's how it affects us, right? The alcoholic doesn't know he's an alcoholic. He just thinks he's just having a drink every now and again. He just thinks that he enjoys drinking. It's not until, that begins to disrupt their normal functions, and other folks begin to see that it's interfering with your work, it's interfering with your family life, and you need to stop drinking. And then that's the time when someone has to be confronted, and they have to confront their own alcoholism. Like any drug, the first step is recognizing that you have a problem. I think that many of our people at that stage where they still under the illusion that it's recreational, and they haven't recognized that they actually have a problem because they're smoking marijuana and they're needing to be high all day, every day.
Well, it gets to the point that I want to reference the Malcolm X clip again about the introduction of these type of drugs in general into the community as a point of being conspiratorial, but also sinister. In that clip, Malcolm X, played by Denzel Washington, talks about us being hoodwinked.
That's right.
And tricked and deceived. And he particularly points at the federal government.
Yes.
It could be the local government. It could be state government.
Yes.
In fact, cannabis or weed has been legalized by the state and is fostered by by the city government. Do you glean or do you see any conspiratorial elements in the distribution of weed in the black community in particular?
Absolutely. I have here in the studio, and I would like to direct to our listening audience to purchase or to look up these two books. I have one book here. It's called Understanding the Assault on the Black Man, Black Manhood, and Black Masculinity. Mm-hmm. And then the other book entitled The Pot Plot. And these books detail the history of the United States government and their covert war on black people. Mm-hmm. And part of that war has been the proliferation of drugs into our community. We know, as you mentioned earlier, with the crack cocaine era, it is now pretty much common knowledge that the CIA was really the main ones behind the introduction and the proliferation of crack cocaine into the black communities. They made movies about it. You have the movie Kill the Messenger, which detailed Gary Webb's story. Gary Webb was an investigative journalist from the San Mercury News in L.A., and he discovered that the CIA was in fact bringing the drugs into the community. And he wrote an article, and it became a big story. And then he wrote a book, and they made a movie out of it. Gary Webb was found dead in his hotel room with 2 bullet heads to the back of his head, and they determined that it was suicide. I don't know how someone could shoot themselves twice in the back of the head, but again, if you watch the movie, if you read the book, it's very clear who killed Gary Webb. And there's another movie out that's now, I think, on FX called Snowfall. And again, I mean, there's several movies out there. We could look at the Iran-Contra scandal, and so we know that our government was involved in bringing crack cocaine into the black community. But it doesn't stop there. That was not the initial, that was not the first, that was not a one-off for the government's involvement in drug proliferation in the black community. As you see in that clip, Malcolm X was talking about that in the 60s. And so there's a long-standing history of this government working to undermine the black community with the use of drugs, and they playing both sides of it because there's the illegal drugs, but now they're coming at us through the use and the proliferation of legal drugs in our community.
It reminds me in some ways, and I want to get to, I have so many questions, but it reminds me of how the indigenous people or the Native Americans were treated so adversely and so poorly over decades. And as a response to that, the federal government allows them gambling houses or casinos or be partners in that, which has led to even more devastation within the indigenous American community, just in terms of the management of that money, the management of the land, and it has led to deeper addictions around alcohol.
Absolutely.
So and I wonder. I'm not as versed as some are around that issue in terms of the Native Americans, but I wonder if that is conspiratorial. Also, if it is the ongoing way or treatment of the Native Americans in terms of their ultimate decimation. We're glad to have Minister Randy Muhammad on Politics and Grits this morning. We are taking some calls. We'd like to keep it directly with the ministers, but we'll take a call or two. 617-282-0685. Minister Randy, a question. Just for me on a pragmatic, I'm a minister, but I also think about this issue of weed on a pragmatic level. Any young person living in Grove Hall this morning, 18, 19 years old, graduating, say this spring from the Burke High School out of Grove Hall, uses recreational pot, is exposed to it, tries to get a job at the MBTA, won't get hired. Tries to go into the medical community down in Longwood to work in maybe Brigham Deaconess, can't pass the drug test if they're using recreational. They go to the MBTA. If they're using recreational, they can't test into the MBTA currently. It just seems to me pragmatically a dumb thing to do, to have this drug legalized and to have our community participate in perpetuating this legalized marijuana, when some of the outcomes could be just so tragic for young families. That kid coming from the Burke not being able to get a job at the post office.
Yeah.
It just makes no sense pragmatically. I want to talk a little bit about the spiritual stuff, because that's important. But do you agree or not agree? It just doesn't seem to make any sense to me.
It's a setup. It's absolutely a setup.
Mm-hmm.
And, those will probably argue and say, well, we're not going to sell to minors. But when we look at it, particularly en route and their distribution, right, because they're going to be a cannabis courier service, if you will.
Yeah.
Someone can just order some marijuana. And I know from when I was a minor and in the streets that if we wanted alcohol, we just get someone older than us.
Exactly.
You could just stand in front of the liquor store and buy me and give them a couple of dollars, and you'll get someone to buy whatever you need. And so with this cannabis distribution center, it's going to be even that much easier for folks to purchase marijuana, and there's no question that it's going to get into the hands of young folks, of children, of teenagers. The reality is that a lot of teenagers and young people in our community are using marijuana, smoking on a regular basis, and even a sadder reality that is real is that we have the unfortunate circumstances that even some parents are indulging in getting high with their children. Mm-hmm. And so yes, we're setting our children up for failure, because there's going to be jobs that they're not going to be qualified for, just on the basis that they are have cannabis in their system, and the harmful effect of cannabis and marijuana on teenagers has been documented. Mm-hmm. Because they know that the frontal cortex of the brain is not fully developed until someone reaches the age of 25 years of age, and so these drugs are having a severe impact on our adolescents in particular, and it is contributing to all type of neurological issues and mental health issues. We see we're having a mental health crisis in the black community, and everyone is talking about the importance of focusing on mental health, but we should also focus on trying to prevent mental health. Mm-hmm. Now, so yes, it's counterproductive, it's counterintuitive for us to have that and to make it so prevalent in our community.
Mm-hmm. And some of us are using marijuana as self-medication.
Absolutely.
Right? They're trying to address mental health issues, or in the larger sense, they're addressing issues around racial oppression.
Yeah.
It's tough being a black person in this country and in this city. And we look at all the statistics that are related to that. Minister Randy $8 net worth for a black family in the city of Boston versus $250,000 net worth. We look at the health disparities. You're a black person living in Mattapan this morning. You're more likely to die younger than a white person living in Beacon Hill. There are stressors just in terms of being black, and we are allowed access to these drugs under the guise that they're recreational, that they're fun, that it's a way to relax after work or before work or while your kids are at school, and we think it is healthy, but it's not healthy. I want to talk to you a little bit. I'm so happy to have you here. I want to spend this whole hour just talking to you about this. I want to talk a little bit about where you come from on this issue, on a matter of faith. You're a Muslim. You're a spiritual man, and my tradition, Judeo-Christian, says that the body is a temple. Absolutely. And that we should consider it sacred.
That's right.
Could you explain from an Islamic perspective? I would imagine that the perspectives are somewhat similar.
Absolutely.
Can you walk through that from some people who may say, why is this Muslim talking about marijuana, and why is he he's bringing the spiritual perspective in this? Can you talk to us about how
Absolutely.
you see this?
Well, no, I agree with you 100%, and we follow the same book, and so yes, we are under the same understanding and knowledge that the body is the temple of the living God, and in Islam we're prohibited from taking on intoxicants, anything that will intoxicate the body, anything that would intoxicate the mind. It's against Islam. It's against the will of God. It's against the will of Allah. And so we stand against it on those moral grounds. We know that it is detrimental to us. It's detrimental to our people. In this particular battle, I have a personal stake in it as well, because not only do I oppose this distribution center or any cannabis being proliferated in our community, I oppose it because I know it's not good for us. It's not good for our youth. It's not good for our community. It's not healthy. But this particular business that is being proposed on the corner of Blue Hill and Devon Street happens to be the building where my beloved Minister Emeritus, Minister Don Muhammad,
Yes.
who was a prominent figure in this city, in the black community, who worked for decades to eradicate the scourge of drugs and violence in our community. This is the place of his business. This is the place where he conducted not only his personal business, but the people's business. This is the place where he can be found, where politicians will reach out. The mayor's office will reach out and talk to him about problems that was taking place in the black community. The governor's office will reach out to him. He would receive calls from the leader of the Nation of Islam, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and conduct the nation's business and the people's business out of his personal business on Blue Hill Avenue. And so for this place that, is so near and dear to us as a place that brought new life to the community, to now be transformed into a distribution center for marijuana is offensive and egregious. I feel that it's disrespectful to do that in that place. We don't want it in our community, period. But to add insult to injury, you're gonna try to set up a marijuana distribution center in the place of a beloved community leader in our community. That's disrespectful. It's unacceptable, and so we're opposing it on the moral grounds and on those grounds.
It's the old Novasheen business where Minister Don, as you said, not only did his personal business in terms of garnering an income, but he did the city's business in terms of social justice.
Absolutely.
You say, and in terms of sacred justice in a way, and I certainly understand that. Let me go back a little bit, just in terms of the pushback around marijuana being a toxin that we should not allow into our body. Well, some people say, well, why do we allow wine drinking? Ministers, maybe not ministers in the nation, but other ministers, particularly within the Judeo-Christian tradition, they have wine. It's considered a toxin. They can get drunk from it. I don't think the Bible prohibits taking alcohol. It prohibits drunkenness. So some people will say, well, you're being kind of hypocritical, Brother Peterson, when you say you oppose marijuana as a toxin when ministers in the Judeo-Christian tradition drink wine, and some of them would drink stronger. Do you see a distinction there between marijuana and as a toxin and wine or alcohol as a toxin?
Well, I'll take that off of you. I think that I was the one that made the point that it is a toxin and it's against us from the Quran not to take any toxins. You didn't say that. I said that. And so as a Muslim, yes, we don't drink alcohol either. So that argument can't be brought to me on that point. Matter of fact, if it was a liquor store that was being proposed, I will be opposing it as well. We don't want any more liquor stores. We don't need any more liquor stores in our community, and we don't need any marijuana distribution centers. Our community should not be a dumping ground for drugs and alcohol and the lowest in these businesses. Why not build up our community with productive businesses, health food stores, things that can uplift our community and give us something that's not going to tear us down. So I don't see a distinction there. Again, we oppose the and we know that alcohol is causing damage. And you talked about the Native American issue, and we know that this government used alcohol, right, to destabilize Native American communities. We know that there's histories of governments. We know that the British government used opioid to basically overrun China and use it to destabilize the Chinese government so that they can go in and have their way. And similarly, we see that the proliferation of drugs in our community, crack cocaine, whether it's now the opioid epidemic, that it's been an epidemic in the black community. Everybody's now talking about the opioid crisis as if it's new. But we know that the black community has been dealing with the opioid crisis going back to the 50s and the 60s. And so we see these things as means to destabilize our community and to keep us away from doing those things that will be productive, that would make us a threat to the powers that be. Because if we are not focused on getting high and focus on recreation so much, maybe we'll start to build our own businesses. Maybe we'll start to build up and start to compete with the dominant society. Maybe we'll start to compete with them for jobs, for business, for industry. And this is what they don't want to see. They don't want to see a thriving black community that is self-sufficient and independent, that is owning its own businesses, owning its own community and competing economically. This is what they don't want to see. So by bringing the drugs in, by bringing the alcohols in, that's a pacifier to keep us from doing those things that will make us a threat to them economically.
Let me ask you a question that somebody's probably thinking this morning, and some of them are texting me. They don't want to call in, right? But some are saying, Minister Randy, shut up. They're saying shut up because we live in a democracy. And we have a right to choose. We have a right to have our opinion. We have a right to do with our bodies what we want to do with our bodies. So shut up. What's your response to that, Minister Randy?
That doesn't make sense, because if this is a democracy, then I have a right to speak.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
So just as you have a right to what you
but
feel
you're telling
that you want
them,
to do.
They're saying you're telling them what to do with their body. You're telling them not to ingest this so-called toxin, right? Or this toxin. And that's none of your business. What I would do with my apartment in Grove Hall affects me and only me. Now, I have a different opinion. I don't think that's true, but that's what they'll say. They say, Minister, great disrespect, with no disrespect, shut up. Let me live my life and do my thing. If they want to have that business over in Grove Hall, let them have it. It's a democracy.
Yes. Well, I would say that we're not trying to tell anyone what to do with their bodies. As a minister, it is my duty and responsibility to teach my people, and so we have to educate our people about the harmful effects of these things, and that's all that we're doing. And we have a right to say that we do not want this in our community. Now, if there are those that want it, they can want it, but we're gonna educate the community about the harmful effect of it, and we're gonna oppose it. Now, at the end of the day, win, lose, or draw, but if we say that this is a democracy and we see that there has to be the even exchange of ideas, there has to be debate about the pros and the cons of a situation. That's what we're having. We're having a conversation, because we're not just going to sit idly by and just allow anything to happen in our community without raising our voices and educating our people and letting them know the pros and the cons and the effect of it. So that's what we're having. So for anyone to say, shut up, don't speak, that's not pretty democratic. That sounds really tyrannical. So if this is a democracy, then no one should be afraid of the exchange of ideas.
You would feel the same way if someone was trying to open up a house of prostitution in Grove Hall. That
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. People under the illusion that, well, it's legal, let it go. And what I would say is that just because something is legal doesn't make it right. Slavery was legal, but it wasn't right. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Jim Crow was legal, but it doesn't make it right. And so, yes, if they legalize prostitution, will we be advocating to open up prostitution houses, brothels in our community? And I asked the question, for those that say, well, it's legal, let's make money. If crack cocaine was to be legalized tomorrow, would we have the same feeling? Would we say, well, it's legal, why not let them, it's their bodies? Of course we're going to speak out against it, because we see the harmful impact, the harmful effect of what crack cocaine did to our communities. And the problem today is that we are not seeing the impact and we're not seeing the devastation of what marijuana is causing, because it is not as harsh as crack cocaine. However, it is having a negative impact on our community.
It's Politics and Grits with Kevin Peterson. Every Thursday morning, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. We're live on 102.9 FM. We are going to take a couple calls. This is just a very important conversation to have in our community. In some ways, the life of our community. So it depends on a dialogue and debate like this. We'll go to the first call. I got some more questions to ask you. I want to know, was the building sold that you're talking about? Under what pretensions was it sold? I think that's interesting. But let's go to the call for a quick question or comment. Caller, you're on the air.
Good morning, Minister Randy. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning.
Larry Ellison.
Good morning, Larry.
So, quick question. Minister, you're absolutely right in your assessment of things, because what I'm speaking is T. Michael Thomas has been trying to put up the People's Academy, trying to get financing, and finally found land.
That's right.
And we can't get things that are very positive in our community. I know there was a sister who got a lot of pushback. She did finally get approval for a sober home not too far from there to help women transitioning coming out of prison, which was much needed in the community. People didn't see. So whenever there's anything to help and uplift us, there seems to be much pushback and not much support. Even for black developers, I have a family member that is in the construction business. It's so difficult to get access to build positive things, homes in the community. Even at Mamleo, we've been trying to erect a building there for our seniors in conjunction with our headquarters there. And it's a struggle when you're trying to do positive things in the community. Sure. But when something, vices come around and the government can tax it and make money off it, they seem to fly through the system and get approved.
You think marijuana is a vice, Larry?
It is a vice, in my opinion. It's been a vice. I know I worked in the drug unit. It was a vice. Matter of fact, it was an illegal vice for years. I know many people who, based on the law, in my position, that people were arrested for it. And even now, whichever side you look on it, it was supposed to, in some ways, and even if you wanted to partake in it, to help in the black community. And there's very few black businesses that have come out of this. I'm not advocating for it, but I'm saying that we haven't prospered from it as they said we would, even in the vice that it is. So it's a tax. Like I said, the government's making a killing on the taxes on it, just like they've done on alcohol and gaming that now is legal in Massachusetts. So once they see money on the table, it doesn't matter how it impacts other people.
That's right. And I would like to comment on that, and thank you, Brother Larry, for calling in your comments. That folks are just looking at the dollars. They just looking at the money that they can make from it, and that is blinding them, or they just don't care about the impact. And it's not unlike the typical drug dealer. The typical drug dealer doesn't care. The dope boy on the corner who's pushing dope or coke or fentanyl, heroin, whatever. They don't care about what devastation is taking place on their customers in their community. They don't have they're not concerned with that. They're concerned with the fact that this is a lucrative business. I can make money off of this, and so therefore, because I could profit from it, then it must be right. And this is the same mentality that I'm seeing by those that want to continue to set up these cannabis distribution or pot stores in our community. They're only looking at the bottom line, that this is a profitable business. I can make a lot of money, and I don't care the impact that it's going to have on the community.
Explain what happened in this process. The building was sold. Under what intentions was it sold?
Well, and it's really sad because, Minister Don Muhammad, my minister, who fought for this community for years, has been dealing with health issues. His wife, who was his partner, she was his business partner, and actually they both ran a business out of Nova Sheen. Minister Don ran the cleaners and the flooring company, and his wife had a health food store or health store on the corner called New Life. And they were partners in business. They were partners in the Nation of Islam, and they were partners for life. But his wife, Sister Shirley, became ill with dementia, and that kind of impacted him in a very strong way. And she was battling dementia for many, many years. She passed away a couple of years ago from dementia. But in the last 10 years or so, Minister Don also became ill with dementia as well, and Alzheimer's. And so he was away from his business, and as a result of dealing with the family health issues, they weren't able to maintain the business. So the building was sold, and when it was sold, the realtor that was responsible for making the sale was told that the intentions of the building was to be used for an office space in the front, and they were planning on using the top part for residential.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the pretext under which the building was sold for a business center or office space, and then a mixed use residential up top. And then it was only after the building was already purchased that the plans came down later to turn it into a cannabis distribution center.
So do you think there was some efforts to deceive?
Well, I can't
community?
say that there was. I won't say that. I won't say that that was their intention going in. I can't speak whether that was their intention going in or not, but surely was a bait and switch. You know,
Well, that's
because
deception. Bait and switch is deception. If you put something out there, the person on the other side is expecting that bait
yeah,
is what's coming to them, and you switch. That's deception to me. Now we're going to invite. I have invited Gary Keith, who's the entrepreneur who owns the building.
Brian Keith.
Brian Keith, to come on to talk about his perspective and why he thinks this business would be beneficial. He talks about jobs. He talks about other things coming into the community related to this. Let's go to the call, the next caller, and then we got about 10 more minutes. I got some other questions for you that I think the community should be listening to, hearing about. Caller, are you there?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, I'm going to make a statement, and I'm not a medical doctor, and no, I'm not going to play one on the radio. But, yes, weed is a plant that makes people get high. Last time I checked, we didn't make anybody kill another human being. They didn't a plant like that didn't violate somebody else's human rights and commit the ultimate act of sin, if you want to put it that way. And yes, I know there are lots of other plants out there that are that is harmful for the human body, whatever you want to call it. Mushrooms included, poison mushrooms included. Also, you brought up earlier, your guest brought up failure. Last time I checked, failure is a part of success. Without learning from failure, nobody in this world cannot succeed. Period. Also, I want to ask your guest a question. Who's this day that he was bringing up? Because I want to know whose day. Yeah? Unless you name names, this day doesn't exist.
Well, I think we've been talking about they as maybe the government, the system of government that we're all a part of. I'm not sure who referenced they. I may have said they. If I said they, I think I'm talking about the government, those who make policy around recreational drugs.
Okay, then why are you scared of saying their names? Last time I checked, we the people vote these politicians, and the politicians work for us. There's no way for you to not name their names, and yet at the same time be scared of saying their names. I'm not scared of nobody, including the politician, because some know I vote into office. I can name Michelle Wu, I can name Governor Baker, I can name any politician for me, and they can't do nothing to me, harmfully speaking.
Great. Thank you for calling, Ditko. Minister?
Yes. So, he talked about marijuana being a plant, and thank you for calling, brother. Much respect. Again, this is just an exchange of ideas. I want to share with you what I know. You're free to do what you will. And so you talked about the fact that marijuana is a plant, and I think you were trying to make the argument that it is benign or it is not as harmful. You said no one has ever killed anyone, and I mean, you can't qualify that, you can't quantify that. When we look at the violence that is taking place in our community on a daily basis, when we look at these shootings, when we see what appears to be senseless acts of violence, when we see the aggression that we're seeing, and even now, which is tragic to me, whenever I see black men that are now killing their women, I wonder what are they? What influence are they under? And so we can't really qualify that statement and to say that, but we know that the marijuana is having an impact. I want to read something from this book, The Pot Plot. There was an article, and Dr. Wesley highlights this in his book. There was an article written on June 6, 2019, New York Times published a piece entitled "Marijuana Damages Young Brains," which in part it reads, "It is tempting to think marijuana is a harmless substance that poses no threat to teens and young adults. The medical facts, however, reveal a different story. Numerous studies show that marijuana can have a deleterious impact on cognitive development in adolescence, impairing executive functioning, processing speed, memory, attention span, and concentration. The damage is measurable with an IQ test. Researchers who tracked subjects from childhood through age 38 found a consequential IQ decline over the 25-year period among adolescents who consistently use marijuana every week. In addition, studies have shown that substantial adolescent exposure to marijuana may be a predictor of opioid use disorder. The reason the adolescent brain is so vulnerable to the effect of drugs is that the brain, especially the prefrontal cortex, which controls decision-making, judgment, and impulsivity, is still developing in adolescent young adults until the age of 25. I want to pause right there for a minute because he talks about impulsivity, and the caller was making the point that that no one has killed no one under the influence of marijuana. But what we do see is this impulsivity where a small argument we see escalates in a snap of a finger. And now we're killing someone because we have no impulse control. And so we see that there's studies that talk about the use of marijuana impairing our impulse and our judgment.
But I also want to, let me interrupt because we only have about 10 more minutes. But I also want to highlight what you said about the deleterious cognitive effects of marijuana. It's one of the reasons why they call it dope.
That's right.
It kind of makes you stupid. It declines your capacity to process things in the environment about which you should be learning or responding to. That's why they call it dope, right?
That's right.
Let me ask you, so here's something controversial. I'm bothered by the fact that some of our elected officials or former elected officials, particularly in the African-American community in Boston, have sort of given a pass to talking about the deleterious impact of dope, marijuana in this case, in our community. The brother on the line talked about how we keep saying they and they. We're not naming people. Now, it is a public record that the former sheriff, Andrea Cabral, now operates a cannabis business. It is a public record, that a former city councilor, Tito Jackson, runs a cannabis business, maybe two of them. Does it concern you? And there are other prominent citizens who haven't been elected officials, but I wanted to focus on them. I want to ask you this very difficult question. Does that concern you that they have come from a place of representation and governance of the black community to a place where some may perceive them as doing harm to constituencies they previously served? Does that concern you?
Yeah, it does concern me, because at the end of the day, it is doing harm. And, people look at it as a lucrative business model. And if that's the only thing that you're concerned with and that's the only thing that you care about, then that's a problem, because we go into public office to serve the people and not to serve ourselves. We go into public service to improve the condition of those of our constituents. And so to turn around and then to be engaged in the proliferation of something that is detrimental to our community, it just shows that there was opportunistic intent all along. And this is what I see, that people are being opportunistic. There's an opportunity that presented itself for me to make a lot of money. And, I'm going to take the opportunity because now it's legal and I can do it. But we're not weighing in the moral factor, and we're not weighing in the impact that it's going to really have on our community. So when you're doing that, you're not really concerned about the community. You're just concerned about lining your pocket. You know, all money is not good money.
That's right.
Right. So yes, you know, they will say it's a business, and I get the argument that folks say, well, you know, black folks, the black community was most impacted by marijuana.
Yeah.
Many young black men ended up going to jail for selling marijuana, for possessing marijuana. So now that it's legal,
Yeah.
black people should have an equal seat at the table. We should be able to now make money legally, like the white boys are making money off of it. So this is their justification that we want black people to be represented in this big business. But, you know, well,
And if we don't take those licenses, the white boys will get the licenses, and they'll dominate the cannabis sale in our community anyway.
Well,
your response is?
my response is that if we as the black community stand strong on our moral principles, that we won't want no one in our community proliferating these drugs. So to my black drug dealers, whether it's legal or not, those that want to make merchandise out of this, those that see an opportunity and want to make money and it's legal, okay, yeah, you're right. You're right, though. Black folks should have equal access to this business. I just say go open them in the white communities. Do that. Because we don't need that in our community. So go to Newton and open up a distribution center. Go to Wellesley.
I can't imagine that being allowed, to tell you the truth.
Well, I mean, so
yeah.
I'm not opposed to a black businessman doing business. If you want to sell marijuana and it's legal and they grant that to you, go in the white community and sell them. Just like the government and white folks, the gangsters have been dumping drugs in the black community for years in the black community. And when the gangsters started to go into narcotics, the narcotics business, when it transitioned from alcohol, once prohibition was abolished, and once alcohol became legal, the gangsters went from selling liquor, and at a certain point there was the introduction of narcotics, and their mind state was keep that in the black community.
Right.
We don't want that in the white community. You know, and so they've been dumping drugs in our community for years. So now that it's legal, black weed man, a black businessman that want to sell weed, okay, sell your weed. I'm just saying, sell it in the white community.
In Evanston, one of the other issues that I work on is the issue of reparations. In Evanston, Illinois, they say take this weed money, the tax from the weed money, and pay reparations. I just saw your reaction.
Yeah.
Of course, you think that's nonsense. That's a nonsense way of sort of justifying the sale of weed. You would agree?
Absolutely. Reparations by doping our community.
Yeah.
Reparations by causing mental health or exacerbating the mental health crisis in our community. That's not reparations.
Well, let me ask you this: as we sort of move towards the end of this wonderful hour, we could go on to this for a couple hours. Let me ask you this: weed is now, or cannabis is now legal in certain amounts. It can be sold over the counter in Boston. For all those, as you say, brothers who have been charged and convicted and are spending time this morning in South Bay or other facilities, correctional facilities. Do you believe in the immediate release and expulsion of their record for the sale of marijuana?
I believe so. You know, I do believe that those of our brothers who are now serving time, who have served a lot of time, who have criminal records because of the proliferation of marijuana, that should be expunged, and I believe that brothers should be coming home, especially now that you want to make it legal, because again, the whole introduction of drugs into our community for control purposes of our people, first by the fact that it was illegal and using that as a pretext for mass incarceration, and now by legalizing it and pushing it in our community as a way of controlling us and subduing us by the content, the high THC content in the marijuana. But yes, to your point, I believe that those who are in prison or have criminal records, they should be released if they're in there for the distribution of marijuana. And matter of fact, I think I'll take it a step further. We need a closer look at the whole criminal justice system and how it has been weaponized, particularly against black men.
Yeah. We have so many questions, so much feedback. Minister Randy Muhammad, people just didn't want to come on and say what they said, but they're saying you're false about statements that you made in terms of who owns the building and how it was purchased. They're saying I'm wrong because I'm not allowing opponents to speak. I don't know if you want to revisit this again. I know this issue is going to go to the cannabis board and perhaps to the mayor. It's not over yet. I think there's a lot to be discussed in terms of procedurally how this thing moves, but also in terms of the rightness and wrongness of marijuana, cannabis in the black community. I thank you so much for being a part of this. You have any parting words?
I want to thank you for inviting me to your show and for us having this conversation. It's a very, very important conversation that needs to be had. And so I want to thank your listening audience for indulging us. And just to say that, people who are promoting this have a vested interest. And so just be careful who you listen to and what you listen to when people are looking at profiting from this business. They'll tell you what you want to hear, but we know at the end of the day that this is something that is detrimental to us and to our community.
It's Politics and Grits with Kevin Peterson. We spent an hour. It was too short with Minister Randy Muhammad of Mosque number 11 in Grove Hall. We invite him back. We're going to invite Gary Keith, who's the proprietor of this business, who wants to cite it in Grove Hall. I disagree with it. And I agree with you, Reverend Minister Randy, that we should be vigilant. We need to keep our community safe, our families safe. We need to exert community control.
That's right.
This is an issue, community control. How do we determine what comes in our community in terms of what's healthy and profitable, and that's for the overall good or improvement of the community. I thank you so much for the work that you're doing. A war, I turned this phrase around, the war on drugs being perpetrated by Minister Randy Muhammad, I think is an appropriate war. I think in your book, the Quran, you may call it jihad.
Yeah,
war. A holy war. I think that's appropriate. And I don't mean to denigrate any the use of that word, but I think it's appropriate. I think we need to respond spiritually to issues where people's lives are at danger, culturally, spiritually, intellectually, all that.
Absolutely.
We need to be caring. We need to be ministers. I thank you for the work that you've done, that you continue to do. I welcome the opinions of others, including Mr. Keith, on this show. Thank you, and we'll talk soon. Let's leave it at that.
Thank you
God
very
bless
much. I'll see you soon.
God bless.